Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, my registered name is Robert Anthony Smith. I'm known as Tony Smith.
And when were you born?
13th of June 1933.
Where did you go to school?
I went to school in Blenheim, St Joseph Primary, St Mary's Boys, then I went to Marlborough College later from Form 3.
And what did you do between leaving school and going to Korea?
I was the oldest of 7, and my both parents' health wasn't good, so I expected to go back for a 4th year. My father said, "I got a job for you," and it was, we never had a car, but it was in spare parts in the garage, which I didn't know what was what, but luckily I was playing cricket, and I was reasonably good from a young age, and the fellow I was playing with was the boss of Social Security Department. He says, "Would you like to come and work for me?" And I said, "I don't think I'd be qualified." "Well, no, 3 years secondary." And so I went along there, and he was very pleased.
Good.
And I was too.
Good. And so, when did you join up?
Well, I joined 1953 it would have been, when there was an ad and they wanted extra troops, so I joined up. But going back, I had to do my compulsory military training. That was from 18, and I completed that, and then we had to do 3 years afterwards, and I finished up in the Armoured Corps, and actually I got some rank there, Lance Corporal, Tank Commander, Valentine Tanks, and then when I joined up, the first thing they did, because Lance Corporal was unsubstantiated, they took my strike off me, and I had to go back and do basic training all over again, and then I was selected. Well, we were divided into half ASC and half artillery, and from there I got basic training was in Burnham, and they had to go up to Papakura for the corps training, and we had a live shoot at Muriwai Beach up on the west coast.
And what was that basic training like?
It was the same thing over again.
Yeah.
And yes, but I suppose it was just doing it.
And what was the reason you volunteered for?
Well, I suppose the seed was sown when I was in CMT, because a lot of those people I knew were going off, and you could go if you got your parents' permission, but I knew I didn't like to ask, because my father had been in hospital with stomach hemorrhage, and my mother, they said she had cancer, but it wasn't really. Later years I found out it was a medical misadventure, cut the wrong tube during a gallbladder operation. Anyway,
So it was sown, the idea was sown by someone in particular, or just by being a part of that group through your basic training?
Yes, I suppose the seed, as I said, sorry I cut it off there.
That's okay.
That the seed was sown then, and later on, when I was 20, in general conversation with father, I said I always wouldn't have minded joining K-Force. He says, "Well, why don't you?" And I was quite surprised, and I said, "How about Mum?" "No, I'll look after it, mate." And So he said, if I was you, I'd be away.
And had he served?
He couldn't because he'd been shot when he was 16, and a fellow walking behind him, and he had used to see his legs with all the lead in it.
Oh,
And
no.
I think I was in some ways serving what he couldn't do.
In a vicarious manner.
Mm.
Did you have any prior knowledge of Korea before you went?
A little bit, because I had an uncle who used to take me, after coming back from church, used to sit there on a Sunday with a Pear's Encyclopedia, and we used to give each other tests and things like that in different countries of the world amongst that, and even though he only went to Standard 2, he won New Zealand crosswords competitions, and later on got to the age of 70, after being a rabbiter and a railway worker, he taught himself Pitman shorthand.
Goodness. Wow.
So he was a marvellous brain, if could have been used differently.
Did any of that information from those quizzes you did with your uncle come in useful when you were over in Korea?
Only in the general nature, what was the capital and things like that, and where it was situated.
And what was the travel like? How did you get to Korea?
Went by plane. Actually, everybody else had left, and 4 of us were kept behind. They didn't say what for, but in the end, one of them was doing, I helped out in the clothing store for a month after the rest had gone, and we were getting very worried it was going to be all over, because one of the fellow that was in the staff room looked up and saw that the 16 field was likely to be returned to New Zealand. So we all went up together and said, we request to be sent to Korea, and we're on the next plane.
Wow.
So, and we left from Christchurch, spent a night in Marrickville in Sydney, then flew to Port Moresby, had a bottle of beer, and served by an Australian soldier.
Wow.
Then we went to Manila, and when we went into the Tropicana Club there, we stayed a night. The manager said, welcome Kiwi servicemen, but I just want to give the locals you local servicemen, a bit of information. There's no such thing as a black New Zealand dollar. Somebody tried to do that. Anyway, we went from there to Japan and landed at Irakuni. It's Australian, it was then, Air Force Base. And then it was 20 odd Ks up the Japanese inland sea to Kure. Then on the truck, about 3 Ks to New Zealand base there. It was Hero at that time.
And what were your first impressions of Korea when you arrived?
We're at Hero. I was at Hero for quite a while, and for some reason one was chosen with the on a gun crew, and we went up the back of Hiroshima, and on the way, one of the limbers went off the road and ploughed over 4 rice plants, and the mama son came out and laid in front of the trucks and wouldn't let us pass until we paid for her 4 rice plants, which was fair enough.
Yeah.
Then we got to Hamakura, I think it's called. It's an Australian training school for Australian forces going to Korea, and they had to do jungle semi training under live fire. So that was our job, was firing up into a bald hill, because it's been used that much. But as soon as the shooting finished in the gaps, all of a sudden there's little ants running over the hill, and it was all Japanese folk who were there digging out the shells, because at that time scrap metal was at a premium in New Zealand. So, and then I came back, and on the ship, and we went overnight to Busan, and Busan was very small to what I saw later in the visit. And I mentioned while we were waiting for the train yesterday that the Korean woman coming up with a baby, it was summer, on her back, and she was picking up very minute pieces of coal, which she must have had to use for fuel, or it was worth something.
And how did you find the living conditions in Korea when you arrived?
Yeah, my living conditions were, it was summer, but if I'd been in the region, I went up to 16 Field, and I was placed in Fox 4 gun, part of the gun crew, had a Maori sergeant in charge of us, and part of the crew were Maori. It was a mixture of an Islander too, so it was, I came from Marlborough, it was a bit different, but it was worked in well.
Would that have been quite unique, that diversity?
No, it spread around like that, and other crews. Yes, it was tent and 4 to a tent, and it was still a danger of malaria, because when we went for meals at night, you got a salt tablet about the size of an Oddfellow peppermint and a Peladrine tablet. And your supervisor, she took it. And at night you had a mosquito net across. And I might have, the Maori boy alongside me was a terrible sleeper. So in the mornings we had to, he was like a cocoon. We had to unroll him and let him out.
Oh no. And what was your role?
I was just a gun number.
Yeah.
It's helping take the shell up to the breach and things like that. And it was, I arrived after the ceasefire, and we had a couple of bug outs, but there was only a couple of times we had live shoots. I fired more shots in Japan than in Korea.
In terms of interacting with others, with the US or Canadians or British, what could you tell us about that?
Yes, we had several manoeuvres with us. I think it was still 3 RAR was still there, and I can remember there one day, all of a sudden yelling out, make way, and they brought a chap out, he'd had a snake bite, and the other Aussie said, oh, don't worry about him, he's a Queenslander, used to it. So, anyway.
Did you have much interaction with any locals there?
Not there, but I did later in 10 Company, a lot. Only washer boys we used to have do our washing, and they'd be down the engine, and with the, I've watched them with the stones, they'd batter your clothes to get like a ringer out of your clothes, and they all come back beautifully folded and things like that, and you gave them a small amount, which they were very pleased to get.
And later on, who was that with?
What happened after 4 months there, the regiment went home, and we were interviewed by, he was Captain, later Major miles, interviewed each of us, and over 100 of us that hadn't done 9 months service moved down to 10 company, which is it just about became double the size. So they carried until extra troops went home. And that's there. I had a job with Canadian rations, because the Canadians, when the regiment went home, the whole British Commonwealth Division reduced to a third of the size. So the Canadians we had the job of issuing them rations. So we used to go to the American supply point, pick up American rations, which were far better than ours, and take them up and deliver them like we would if the Korean War was still on the backs of trucks, and we met them different. Even had a lot to do with the Canadians earlier, and found that the ones by chance, a lot seemed to be Scottish origin. Funny, you know.
Oh. And are there any particular stories from your service experiences that stand out?
Well, I suppose contact with Koreans there. Each day we'd go 40 k's, and we went through the Turkish centre, where they used to spring to attention, salute Aussies and New Zealanders, I think only, because the relationships were very good with them at that time. And also we'd pass Koreans' funerals quite often, and they get dressed up and real traditional with the hats and that, and clang with cymbals and that on the road, and they'd be proceeding to little burial grounds which were mould in the half circle in the fields there. We tried to slow up behind them, but eventually had to go past them, and it was a bit rude of us sometimes, because the wind would be blowing and dust, and and I suppose it was the same for all troops. It's a pity. Also, you used to pass paddy fields with Koreans with their A-frames carrying large amounts of scrub from off there, which they fed into tunnels under their house, and they smouldered overnight, and I'd never been in one, but some of the others said they were very warm, and the Koreans said that theirs was the first air conditioning of the world. So anyway.
And you mentioned to me, I think yesterday, that that plant burns at quite cold, even in quite cold temperatures.
Yes. The Korean winter, to me anyway, we have a very wet cold, but it seemed to be dry and burnt more easily.
And what was that like, the winters over there?
It was very cold, but I was the lucky. Our group, they'd sorted out the clothing properly, and what we received was really great, and covered up double pairs of trousers and a lot of extra clothing, parka over the top.
Was there any, not resentment, but angst between those who had come over earlier and had to do it with the summer gear and tough versus those who came later who had their gear?
No, I think it was just you've come here. It's unlucky if you usually 18 months you might do one. Well, I done 1.5 winters. But the thing of the winter is fire. I got caught. I was sergeant of the guard, and the second one was changing over the fuel, and it caught the flaps of the tent and everything, and I know I went back in, which probably in some ways just to check everybody and they're okay, but I know smoke, I didn't know where I was going, and to get out again. So that's, and there's no frozen, water's all frozen. You had about 20 pots of sand around, which is your main fight against winter fire. And there's several others who were killed just down the road. There's the Cameron Highlanders, 2 sergeants were burnt while I was there.
From an accidental fire breaking out.
And talking of accidents, Lester Hum was next door to me. He died while I was there in the next bed, and it was left empty for quite a while. And Melissa just mentioned about talking to the dead, and that actually happened in our group. Quite often, other guys would walk past and talk to him.
Oh. And do you mind talking about what happened to him?
Yes, his truck. I can remember in the morning he said, "Just ask who's going to Seoul for the day." And he'd organised with another guy from another platoon. And he went, and it was a flat top. He had flat trucks. Pity made it worse. And on the way home, they flipped it over.
Oh.
You had to be careful on the roads in the winter there, and quite often the New Zealand drivers become experienced, but English young ones who conscripts, and they're going off the road all the time. It's quite dangerous. And it finished up when the regiment moved over to ASC. They went from gunners to drivers, but they did a count who had driver's license. There was 70 of the drivers never had driver's license. So he was a major then, Major Miles said that find your friend and sit him alongside you as a shotgun cover, and whenever you get a chance to learn, and they picked it up in 2 or 3 months. Wow. It was a real good move.
Yeah. Oh, good. And what about rest and relaxation? What was your experience of that? Where did you go?
We used to play a lot of, in the summer, volleyball, and actually we got quite good different groups and challenging each other. It was really broke the monotony, because with team company is different to 16 field. You're on the move doing something different, but team company was the same job all the time, and it would have been different when the war was on, but this is garrison and feeding all the other troops, and they came through each day. I finished up as a clerk when I moved there, and that I should have put my occupation down as a clerk. I might have gotten there earlier, but and I finished up being chief clerk composite platoon. We had to work out the ration strengths to how much each group got, and you had a menu like 1/25 of salt, an ounce of salt for a man, and how much butter, a smaller dab of butter and all this. Then you had 473, but a Maori boy had worked out to put a ruler on 400, and one in was 50 and 1 and 3, and you're just about able to add it in your head, but it was far quicker, and we got the trucks through quicker, because they were waiting, all the groups were waiting there to pick up their rations.
And that was back with the 16th?
No, this is with Army Supply Corps.
Okay.
And I was composite platoon. That's the one responsible for the rations and the petrol point and ammunition.
And did you travel anywhere for some rest and relaxation?
Yes, when I was in 10 Company, I had 7 days in Tokyo.
Okay.
And I've got to say that when we got to Tokyo, the best thing was to have a shower and a haircut, because we had mobile showers, but we never saw them very often at all. So you just more or less wipe yourself down and you felt awful.
Yeah.
So that was wonderful to get there, and actually I went and had a few drinks, and and it's I suppose a credit to Aussie New Zealand relatives. Aussie came over and said, "Come on, Kiwi, we're heading up town," and we headed up and around all up the Ginza and here, there, everywhere. And he'd been in Cap Yon actually, and he is. So it's just, to me, it brought home the real friendships between Australia and New Zealanders.
And do you remember some of the activities you did while you were in Tokyo?
Oh, we went and saw all the sights and that. We travelled on a Globemaster, which was close to 300 on it, and all different nations. I was sitting next door to a Canadian First Nation Indian,
Wow.
but he didn't talk at all. I tried to talk to him, but I don't know if he was scared or not. But anyway, and I actually felt airsick on the bottom layer, and but on the way back on the top layer, it was good as gold. Though took a slow flying, took a long time to get around Mount Fuji. And when we were waiting to go in, one of the Australians yells out, "I hope you guys know this plane holds the most record for the most air deaths." And it had been thank you, Australia.
And sports, you mentioned sports
Yes,
earlier.
yeah,
Volleyball?
and then I played cricket.
Yes.
And cricket, we bulldozed out an area for a field and played Australia, and there he may have been their CO or second. He was a very good cricketer. He found out later on he'd played for the Huttons 11 against the MCC. So that was, we got beaten holler. But one of the unusual incidents happened in that game was he hit the ball towards the boundary, and just then a United States Jeep just pulled up, and the driver gets out and walks onto the field and picks the ball up. And he's looking at it like this, and the fielders, "Give it to me." No, I want to have a look. And they ran 5 runs before we got it out of his hands. So anyway, in the cricket, we went to play the Dorsets and organised, and it was, they were, when we got there, found they were all officers except one OR, and the OR was Barrington. He was a brother to the English cricketer, and I say, "Barrington, which end do you want?" He skittled us there. Then he came in and made 40 not out. Then they sent him back to the lines. They told him to go back to the lines while the rest played. I thought they should have let him watch the rest.
Yeah.
So we got beaten holler. But we played the Engineer English and beat them. Then I played basketball by chance. New Zealand versus England, we called it. Went down to Incheon and we won that. So anyway, so I've got my black singlet with a silver fern. Only time I ever wore the silver fern.
And you still have that?
Yes.
You still have it?
My son put it on my 70 invitations.
Excellent. And you were there after the armistice?
Yes, well, within the year, because I wouldn't have got the butcher's apron. 12 months you were, so I had 4 months in the 16 field, and over to about over a year in ASC. I never had any more leave actually from then, except 3 days at Incheon Small Leave Centre. Was a Japanese officers' leave centre, and they had play sort of small golf and row on the things and have a beer. So it was a good break because I hadn't had 12 months doing the same thing. It was getting very monotonous. So.
And the march out?
Yes.
Do you want to tell us about that?
I was very fortunate to be there in 16 field, and we put in a bit of practice, and also we probably had a lot more CMT fresh from marching and that, because I think we improved some of the older ones. The CRA said that they called out the guard and two of them didn't have slings in their watchguard. He says, you certainly improved. And Brigadier Weir came from New Zealand to take the salute. And I remember his words were, men of the 16 Field Regiment, I congratulate you on your rugged appearance, which could have meant anything. Then the CRA said something, and he said that he felt we were the best artillery regiment in the British Commonwealth Division. So
amazing.
Nice to hear. And after that, we had a divisional shoot. That's all the guns in the division at an imaginary target, and I think we were the last gun to get the shot away. So I think you can say the last organised shot in Korea. But an officer went and got a gun the next day with the CRA and fired a couple of shots just to say they fired the last shots in Korea.
And you've been back?
Yes, I've been back
Yep.
to Korea, and it's an economic miracle to see where even Wee Jambu was only, now it's skyscrapers, and even skyscrapers back towards where we were. We were based, well, when we moved the supply point from where the old location to Gloucester Valley. And Gloucester Valley is where the Gloucesters were wiped out just about. And on the side of the hill there's a collection of rocks, and it's one of Genghis Khan's castles, but it just looks, and it would be more a trading post, I would say. And when we went back, we knew more about where the Gloucesters were. But we had, not only us in Gloucester Valley, there was the 5th Tanks and Cameron Highlanders, and the Dorsets were a bit further over. Sorry.
You go.
And yes, we sort of closer together was. But I did feel, especially on both occasions at 16 Field, being part of the British Commonwealth Division, that you got that feeling that buddies together. It was a better feeling, and I think, I wasn't there earlier, but they were split supporting other people. Must have been a lot more difficult. And since I've been home, I've been in a position that with Owen Gleeson, he was the organiser of the 2050th reunion, and I've been helping him right through with helping ex-veterans, with ill health, and we used to run in Palmerston North every second month. Wellington, Marston and Wanganui used to come over and have a get together and run raffles, and everybody got up and told what's the latest in veterans news. So, and I've learnt a lot about while I wasn't there, but I met and learnt a lot about others, and I'm a keen researcher, so I've enjoyed my time. I've been of some help since I've been home, I suppose.
And going back to the end of your experience in Korea, what was that like? How did you finish that, come home?
It was sudden, actually, because on Christmas Eve I've only had a month to go. On Christmas Eve I get a telegram from my father saying my mother only had 9 days to live.
Oh.
And I went up to the CO, and I was on a Qantas plane home, only soldier passenger, and I had one from my platoon to Hong Kong. He went on leave, and yes, that was an experience. And getting home, I rang my father, and he says, look, he says, since Mum's heard you're coming home, she sprung down. He says, I don't think I'd mention it. And I went and gave the story to the army, and they were okay about it. I'm home. So.
Have you had, what was the communication like with home while you were away?
I used to write, and I suppose everybody's writing to everybody, and I had an aunt, my father's aunt really, who was a nun. So I decided to write to her, and they said, who are you writing to there? And I said, a nun. Oh, so I sent a letter to her, and I saw her after the war, when I was home, after I was married actually. And then I found out later on, my father's half-brother, who was killed at Mercy Matruth, wrote to her too. So I could have caused her a lot of worries. And my brother is named after him, and the one that died got killed at Miss Matruth. And he got the letter eventually, a copy of it, and he saw to Chris Pugsley, the historian. He said, "What should I do with it?" He said, "Send it to the War Memorial." He did. Since then, I've found in three persons in study have used that to signify how the country was in Italy and Lebanon and all that, because that's all he wrote about. What do you write about a nun to a nun? So, anyway, sorry.
What was it like when you got home, adjusting back into?
I was very. I have to say, it's the worst I've felt actually.
Yeah.
I wanted to be. Well, I thought about it. I didn't make any moves, but pressure cooker teacher.
Yeah.
It was available at that time, and when I got back, I found it was in September, and I arrived in February, and I just went around and saw all my old friends and that, and I went into where I worked in Social Security, and they said, "Would you come back?" And I said, "Oh, I want to go." That's, "Well, look, you come back here, and if you're still feeling the same way." And I finished up being the cashier there, and they were going through problems of the previous one and pinching money all for them, and I had all the inspectors there, and they gave me a big pat in the back and gave me a great mark, more than I was worthy of, and that set me up in the public service, so I stayed with them for quite a while. Then my father got knocked off his bike and killed 18 months after I came home. So I was with the family then. My mother, there was no ACC then, and my mother had to go through lawyers and that, and she settled for 3/4 because my father had a drink that night. So anyway, and eventually then she wanted to move away from Blenheim, so I got a transfer. And unbeknown to me, she goes out and looks. Her mother had owned 3 country stores, and that's what she wanted to do, and asked me to go with her half share, which I did, and it was quite successful. But her health broke down, so I went back into the department. I was lucky to get on a survey team of elderly persons accommodation, whole of New Zealand for 6 months, interviewing people, drawn at random and over 65s. But I'm wandering off the subject. So.
It's okay. When you did return, was there much support given at the time for New Zealand War veterans?
Yes, there was
Korea?
rehab, but I never really heard until I looked up Archway and I see my file there, and I might have used that to get into teaching or even university study, which I had to do later on. So it was there, but I didn't take advantage. And also, I was working with a whole lot of Second World War men who looked down a little bit on not me but others, CMT more.
Why was that? That the Korea, because I heard this mentioned previously that the Korean War veterans weren't very well welcomed into the RSA and by the
Yes, it
Second World War
was, and
veterans.
then
Why was
later
that?
on, I think that's part of this RSA, because in Te Kuiti I went into there with my brother-in-law later, and on the board showing all the officers, and it had a note at the side that before World War II, at World War II started, that you had to be World War I to be a president. Then later on, you had to be president World War II. They wouldn't accept others, and there was a hierarchy, limits down the side of the board. So that showed you there was a hierarchy order.
Was there a different perception to veterans among the New Zealand public in comparison to World War II veterans?
No, it wasn't too bad. No.
And did you participate in Anzac services right from your return?
Yes, 18-year-olds we had to.
Yeah.
And then later on, I'd be in business, and I didn't go to spare the time. But I met a lot of Koreans, ex-servicemen there too.
In New Zealand?
Yeah, in
At
New
the
Zealand,
services?
yeah, in the store, and
Yeah.
one with a Japanese wife who he had done all these grocery business with me because she couldn't go into a grocery shop. He was working late, so he used to come to me to get his household purchases, which I was pleased to be of help. He didn't mind paying higher prices.
Yeah. And in terms of students, the students of today and teachers today, are there any messages that you would like to leave them with?
As long as they don't forget, I've been at home with young fellas bringing in things and that, and I said something about the Korean War, and he says, "What was that? When did that happen?" So there is a need for people to know. I got quite shocked because I thought he would have known, and he was working, 17 or 18, and I thought he would have. So that's, I was a bit shocked at that.
Yeah. What's your, what is the lasting memory for you of your time in Korea?
Saying goodbye to them all.
Yeah.
But they soon found me back. I had my group, I was the first to come, and they had a party and decided, let's get on the plane and see Tony Smith. And next minute, the girl in the office says, there's a whole lot of drunken fellas at the counter wanting to see you. So I said, hey, I'm back at work. Anyway, I had an unusual occasion while I was in Korea.
Yes.
Well, he turned out he wanted me to be best man for him, but he'd just arrived in a later group, and it was the first Tuesday in November, the day of the Melbourne Cup, and the Australians had organised a broadcast of the Melbourne Cup, and we had some great New Zealand horses in it, and he had a brother, a jockey, Jim Thomas his name was, and he came over, and I can remember him, we had to get rid of all the cartons because all the English rations come in tins and that, so he had to rip them up and burn them in the 44-gallon drum, and it's November, it's getting a bit cold, so we're all standing there with a big Zenith Transistor, which was the big radio of the day, and it's booming out. And Jim, what was the name of the horse? Red Craze. Red Craze was the New Zealand favourite, and it hit the front, Red Craze. And this other Australian horse, Helios, was fighting back, and he yells out, "Get out of it, you Aussie goorie!" And next day he got a telegram from his father, "Jim, you drew second horse in the Melbourne Cup, $10,000. So he troops up to the CO, "Sir, request permission to go home." And he looks at him and he says, "Soldier, you made a contract with the New Zealand government for 2 years and you're going to finish it. So you didn't play cards against you didn't anything, because he got luckier and luckier." And later on he came home, and of course he had that. He gave his father power of attorney to look after the money, bought his mother a car. It was a lot of money at that time. And his lawyer, Mr. Leggett, the New Zealand cricketer, told him to buy 9 acres at Pribbleton, which he did, and he made a lot of money out of it. And he went back to his old job as a butcher at the freezing works. And he died several years ago.
What has it meant to you to have the events that bring the veterans together over the years?
We have at Otaki School, we have it's a Maori Immersion School. We have the ceasefire 27th of July each year. We've got a memorial there. The Korean ambassador comes out, the army supply a group, and we used to have a lot there. We're down to about 3 now, 4, and we have it. And the Korean government have been very careful, and the Korean and one Korean ambassador played a trick on us about Pokeri Kiriana. He got up and he said, as a waiata to there, and he said, "I'll sing you one of your songs," and the whole Korean embassy sang it back, and all the Maori children opened their mouths and pinched our song. Which was quite interesting.
Oh.
So, and that's something we should, and the numbers now, hopefully, the ambassador, they enlarged the memorial. It started through a couple of the staff being ex-K-Force, and also Captain Mason, who was an FOP, it's Forward Observation Officer at Cap Yon. He was very much involved in that, and he was a good friend of Alan through there. Sorry. And so he was. We look forward to that, and we have lunch there.
And you
and
regularly...
we get to the ambassador's very good. He comes and sits with us.
You meet quite regularly with Alan?
Yes, every week. Alan and I have morning tea together. I drive, and we also, there was 2 others were there, and this is when Owen Gleeson was alive, and when Owen died, they said, "Why don't we have it together?" We've met 4 of us right through, so.
Just at different events and things, yeah.
It's a happy event every Friday, and the golf club are all ready for us and that.
Oh, good.
We're their favourite customers.
Excellent. And do you speak much about your time?
And also, our friend Woody, who's a past president of the Korean Residents Association, and he's been vice president of the New Zealand. He comes and sits with us, and he tells us about things from the Korean side. And he goes home every year, and he's got 2 daughters who are educated in Palmerston North, and his 2 daughters live and work in Berlin now.
Wow.
They've gone to there. and yeah, he's a technician from Terra. He's been 20 years now. Be one of the early ones.
And is there anything else you'd like to say before we finish?
I can't help but not comment on how generous the Korean government and people, both in Korea and here, have been so generous to us. And yes, it's like they're a second country to us. And
You mentioned how moved you were yesterday.
yes, yesterday when I came in there, that's you don't expect it. It's embarrassing sometimes, but you know, they mean it, and so genuine. On that revisit, we were looking for all things the race course, and in the underground, and here there's people a lot older than us getting up, and because we had this Korean War veteran thing on the side, and giving us seats and things like that.
It's very different to here in New Zealand, isn't it?
Yes, and I've got to say this, they've learned a lot more than us. When we had a lovely tourist guide, and we asked her, you knew where the race course was. She says, you're not going to bet on horses. Oh dear. And apparently the two casinos are at the international airports. So there's but still there's 53,000. They only had the horse racing once a week, but it was a wonderful place, but they used the interior of the race course as a family park underneath. It was quite, you know, they're gifted in more ways than economic too. You know, the parts they played in the world community things just shows you that way. I wonder whether they need jails over there. But anyway, they had a terrible time. A lot of the ones around had Japanese wives, and they've died, and they've still come along, and noticed that they've developed themselves in that, and they've left children that you can be proud of, and that what they've done now. Yes, it's great. I'm pleased to be part of, in a small way, of what Korea is today. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Tony.